Hi everyone, thank you very much for this opportunity. I am honored to be here today. I thank you very much, Thiago and Claudia, for allowing me to present remotely as I'll not be able to go to New Orleans. So I downloaded this software, a free trial version of it. Probably you will see some watermark somewhere. I hope this doesn't bother you and that we can focus uh, on the main topic and the reason for me to present that. That is just start a dialogue with the forest community. It's my first forest. I defended my dissertation 2 months ago at the School of Communication at American University in Washington, D.C., discussing mainly the politics of internet interconnection infrastructure and what are the social, political, and economic aspects that come from this global media infrastructure. Today, I want to present a specific topic of my dissertation, that is the way of how indigenous communities in Mexico are building their own internet and are building their own internet interconnection infrastructure and strategies. The interesting thing is that I spent 4 months in Mexico doing field work, and I went there originally to study big interconnection facilities. We call it Internet Exchange Point, and I went there to study the first IXP Internet Exchange Point of Mexico. But I ended up going to some indigenous communities, the Celtal and Zapoteco communities that received me so well, looking in fact on how the absence of data XPs impacted the way that these communities were building their own infrastructure. So this is interesting because ethnographic approach makes us and allows us to have that, right? You start with some goal, very clear goal, and then your field work brings you to other things. So I will show you some of the strategies that these communities are using to bring communications, internet communication to their communities where big corporations say that it's not profitable to go. So my goal is to discuss governance by infrastructure. Instead of discussing the governance of infrastructure, I want to show how infrastructure impacts our values, our societies, our human rights, and social and political aspects that come from these technological artifacts. I have for this paper 2 questions. First, what are the implications of internet infrastructure governance and design for enacting and constraining communication rights? And to what extent are indigenous communities' rights and expectations of autonomy affected at the internet interconnection level? My work is built mainly on communication studies, infrastructure studies, surveillance studies, and values and technology design literature. And the way that I look at my object or my methodology is influenced by STS approach and scholarship, and also feminist studies and decolonial studies, with all the critiques that this scholarship does to the way that we look at power, the problematization of dominant narratives, and so on. My methods are basically ethnography of infrastructure. So I went to 3 communities, 2 Zapoteco communities and 1 Celtal community, to see how they were building their infrastructure towards the internet. And and I also went to see some events with participant observation. I would like to show you then, we start showing you the way, the journey between a capital city and these communities. This video I took when I was in Oaxaca state, where most of indigenous communities in Mexico live. They call themselves indigenous. They are resignifying this term, so I use the same term that they use to talk about themselves. And this state has 23% of the municipalities in Mexico, and at the same time 3% of population, and they are among many hills, as you will see, and this is one of the reasons that big corporations, telecommunication corporations, they used to say that they will not offer service there because it will not be profitable. It will be a lot of investment to reach not so many people what they want. So let's see for some this video. Okay, so after can be an hour or 8 hours, depending on the transportation that you are using or where this community is based, you arrive in communities like this. This one is in another state, Chiapas. The name is Abasolo de San Martin, where they didn't have any telecommunication service until a member of the community started to develop their own internet and then share that with other neighbors. So this is how things are working out in these rural communities. Once companies that run the internet say no, they start to figure it out how they can bring signal to their territories. And I'll show you then one of the ways and one of the most common ways how these people are doing that, so we can learn with this. We can learn with that. So imagine that you are from this community and you want to bring internet and you don't have any service around, even telephone, right? Some of them have telephone, but many of them no. So the first thing that you need to figure it out is where the internet is already. So where these companies are offering their services, and which city or town is closest to my community. So this is the picture of Oaxaca City, that is the capital of the state of Oaxaca. And many of these indigenous communities live behind these hills and mountains in the back of this picture, right, as I showed in the video. So they then identify where is the town or city in which the internet is already offered. And they try to, they make contact with acquaintances that they have in this city to ask, may I use your house to contract internet from your household? In this sense, they will be a customer from a big corporation that offer the internet, but they will do it differently. After having the signal and the internet installed in that home, they make some deal with the owner of that home and place an antenna, a radio antenna in the rooftop of that house. With that, the second step is to identify where are the hills where you could place a tower with another antenna to capture that signal, towards your community. So here in the back, you see that red circles with some towers where you could use to place an antenna to capture the signal from any of these houses where they contracted the internet from a big corporation. After identifying the hill and the towers in these places, you then make kind of a map. This is a very structured map that Humberto Morales from Guelatao de Juarez shared with me, but not all the communities have this kind of professionalism, let's say like that. But here you can see, like in the bottom of this picture, where one antenna is placed, and then all the way down to the community where another antenna will be placed, bringing that signal in a wireless way, right? Antenna connected to antennas until your community. Then you brought the internet to your community, and it is placed somewhere in your house, so in the house of people who live in that community. So in this case, the radio antenna was placed in a clothesline bar, bringing the signal from that antenna in the hill. And then inside the house, you have routers placed. And this is an interesting place, an interesting case where the router was placed close to the altar that this family had in that home, showing kind of the importance and giving many meanings for the internet at that house. With these examples, I am bringing some terms from participatory design literature. They use the term infrastructuring, kind of saying that this information infrastructure is always becoming something. So the idea behind this term infrastructuring is that we should understand infrastructure as a process. And I think that these cases that I show you are very show with evidence that this is really what is going on. That when we look at the history of the internet, we should not think that the internet was designed completely in the 20th century by engineers, mainly from the US. Because in fact, we are having all these people, including the Celtal, Zapoteco people, designing the internet today. And this is one of the things that I'd like to argue here. And here it's another example of how they are infrastructuring this internet. So they bring some tree trunks, they arrange that trunk, take it to the rooftop of the community, of a house, place an antenna there, and then put that trunk in a direction that can capture the signal from that hill's antennas, right? And these pictures I took. I was very lucky to be at this time with these people. They are Celtal, and learning how they were doing that, because you could also see all the values and the inspiration and aspiration that they had during that process of bringing the internet. There was a kind of proudness because they were doing that by themselves with their own efforts, regardless companies saying that they wouldn't have the internet, their services, right? So this is where things become interesting, but also bring us some reflections that I'd like to bring here for me to finish this presentation, where we can see the appropriation of internet infrastructure, and also the politics behind the way that they are interconnecting to the larger internet. So here are some points that I would like to make and bring. One is that in internet governance scholarship, when we see telecommunication companies talking about the infrastructure that is between their headquarters and customers, households, they call this infrastructure last mile. But what I could learn with these people is that this is, in fact, from their perspective, from where they are situated, this is first mile actually. And this first mile is then being designed by shared networks. And I prefer the term shared networks instead of community networks, because some of these I call business, but not all of them are for profit, in fact. But many of these networks all of them are being built under the idea of sharing, because they are contracting the internet service from a big corporation that does not allow sharing signal at all in their terms of services, but then they are not only sharing it, as they are also building the internet to make that shareable, right? So this is why I call this shared networks. And it is possible to say that there is a counter-hegemonic action in all these practices once this sharing action is against what internet service providers, big ISPs want, right? But at the same time, there are tensions along these actions, because according to my interviews, they are building this internet infrastructure, but they are also asking, why are we doing that? In the sense that what kind of content are we bringing to our community? So we are bringing big corporations like Google, Facebook, and others, right? Is that what we really want? So these are the things that come up from conversations, from interviews. Another important point that this research brings is that when we are studying the internet ecosystem as a whole, we understand from a technical perspective that networks are the ones who are identified with a number. This number we call autonomous system numbers. But what happens is that these networks that I showed you that are being built by indigenous communities, I defend are networks, and they are internet networks. They are local networks that are becoming global at the moment where they interconnect to the larger internet at the rooftop of that household in that city that is close, or the closest city to their territories, right? So there they are local and they are becoming global. But although I can see that they are networks from an internet governance standpoint that uses these autonomous system numbers to identify how many networks do we have on the internet, these networks do not exist. So they are completely in a blind spot. And that's a thing that we need to reconsider when studying internet infrastructure. So I defend that we should use new ways to understand internet design, seeing these people as co-designers of the internet, all together with engineers who are defining and designing and proposing protocols, and along also with air, hills, rooftops, antennas, routers, towers, street towers, and so on. So they are all co-designing the internet today. Looking at what happens in the very moment of interconnection of these local networks to the global internet, one can see also imbalance of power, because these local networks want to include their communities on the larger internet, right? But at the same time, they are expanding commercial services of these big corporations, bringing them to their community. Even if they are disrespecting their policies, the policies of these big corporations, they are still under their policies, which means that if these companies want to shut down the internet, they can, right? Because the signal is is their signal, right? So there is this imbalance of power when these local community networks or these indigenous networks become part of the internet. They are part of an actor network, but not with the same power. Although they feel powerful, although these people feel many good, they have many good values behind their actions. What kind of values they have? They feel proudness, autonomy, self-sustainability, emancipation. All these values one can notice from their actions, of course. But because of these hegemonic actor networks and the power that they have, you have this moment where there is a tension between the values of these communities and this hegemonic power. That's why I call this very interconnection moment value seams, using a term that Cathy Shelton uses, just to make us think of the kind of tension in values that these interconnection strategies bring. And finally, because of these findings, I'd like to argue, very influenced by Bruno Latour's work on technology and the morality of society, that infrastructure is constitutive of society's morality. With that, I'm saying that these indigenous people have their own values, and they are building their internet infrastructure based on that value of communication. They want to communicate not only among them, but also with people, their members, their family members that are living in other places, right? But they want to show that, they want to make that happen. But for them to do that, the infrastructure is also constraining these values and is also helping them to build their values in context. As Jafari Naimi and colleagues talk about context and values, that values are not things that are strict and stable, but they are always being constructed. So I argue that we should bring this infrastructure to the forefront to talk about values, thinking of what kind of internet do you want, and using all this experience to think of what are the constraints that this infrastructure has for us to build the internet that we desire. So thank you so much for your attention. I really appreciate. I hope it was nice. Thank you so much.